Hi, everyone. Welcome to One Moment at a Time. I'm your host, Nikki. If you've been with me from the beginning, you probably noticed something is different. This podcast has a new name. For the first 5 episodes, the journey was called Behind the Cam. Those episodes are still there. They always will be there. They're part of my story, and they're always have a special place in my heart. But somewhere along the way, I realized these conversations had become something bigger. They weren't just about what happened behind the cam. They some became conversations about healing, about loss, about resilience, about hope, and about learning how to keep moving forward even when life does not look the way we imagine. That's why this podcast is now called One Moment at a Time, because that's how so many of us make it through life. Hardest seasons, one moment at one breath, one step at a time. There's one more change you'll notice. For a long time, I introduced myself here as Liliana. The name served a purpose, and I'll always be grateful for it. But today, I'm simply Nikki, not because I'm leaving the past behind, but because I'm finally ready to bring all of me with me. Whether you've been here since episode 1 or just joining me for the very first time, thank you for being here. Now, let's spend this moment together. Before we jump into today's episode, I want you to do something with me. Take one deep, slow breath. Now let it out. Life moves fast, doesn't it? We're always running to the next appointment, the next errand, the next obligation, the next thing on our list. Sometimes we move so quickly that we forget we're actually living while we're trying to get somewhere else. Today's episode isn't about cancer. I know the title might make you think it is, but it really isn't. This episode is about life. It's about what happens after something changes you forever. It's about learning to live again. People spend a lot of time talking about cancer. They talk about diagnosis, chemotherapy, radiation, surgeries, the celebration when they're ringing the bell. People smile. They hug you. They tell you, congratulations. They tell you, you're strong. And then life is supposed to go back to normal. But what is normal anyways? That's the question I want to explore today. Because if you've ever been through something that completely changed your life, whether it was cancer, grief, divorce, losing someone you loved, or simply waking up one day realizing you ain't the same person anymore, then I think you'll understand exactly what I'm talking about. This isn't just my story. It's a story about what happens after life changes us. I was 37 years old. Like another day, I went to work. I wasn't thinking my life was about to change. I wasn't thinking this ordinary workday would become one of the most unforgettable days of my life. Then my phone rang. It was my doctor. There are moments in life where time almost seems to stop. This was one of those moments. You hear the word, but your brain doesn't quite know what to do with them. You hear them, but somehow they don't feel real. I don't remember every word from that conversation, honestly. I don't think anyone really does, but I remember the words that mattered. You have breast cancer. Everything after that became a blur. I remember hanging up the phone. I remember sitting there for a few moments, trying to understand how my life had changed in less than a minute. One phone call. That's all it took. One phone call. And suddenly, my future looked completely different. I remember thinking, I'm only 37. This can't be happening. I'm not ready to die. These thoughts weren't logical. They weren't organized. They weren't calm. They were simply the thoughts of someone whose world had just been turned upside down. I left work. I don't even remember walking to my vehicle, saying goodbye to anybody. I don't remember turning on the key. I don't remember much of anything except trying to leave. Home wasn't that far. Normally it was about a 45-minute drive from Pullman back to Lewiston. A drive I made so many times before that I could almost do it without thinking. But this time, I wasn't driving home. Not really. I was driving into a life I never imagined I'd have to live. Every mile brought another question. What happens now? How do I tell my husband? How do I tell my family? Am I going to survive this? What does cancer even mean for me? There wasn't anyone sitting in the passenger seat. It was just me and my thoughts. And if you've ever received life-changing news, you probably know exactly what I mean. It's almost as if your body is moving, but your mind is standing completely still. Nothing makes sense. No future suddenly feels uncertain. Even breathing feels different. I wish I could tell you I handled it with incredible strength. The truth is, I was scared. I was overwhelmed. And I was heartbroken, not because I knew what was coming. I didn't. I was heartbroken because in one phone call, the life I thought I was living suddenly wasn't guaranteed anymore. I think that's one of the hardest parts about hearing the word cancer. It doesn't just give you a diagnosis, it changes your relationship with time. Suddenly, tomorrow feels uncertain. Next month feels uncertain. Even next week feels uncertain. Everything you took for granted, you begin looking at differently. You kept driving, trying to make sense of something that simply didn't make sense. I had no idea that before I reached home, before chemo, before all my surgeries, before radiation, before even scars, before rebuilding my confidence, before all of it, I was about to meet something that would stay with me for the rest of my life. I don't remember every mile of that drive. I wish I could remember exactly what song was playing on the radio, or even if the radio was on, or every road sign I passed, every little detail. But honestly, I can't. Because when your world changes in an instant, everything else becomes background noise. I remember driving. I remember staring out through the windshield, cars passing, people were going about their day. Someone was probably headed to lunch. Someone else was probably taking the kids somewhere. Someone was probably laughing. Someone was probably having the best day of their life. And there I was, trying to understand mine. It's funny how life works like that. The whole world keeps moving, even when we feel like it stopped. I remember thinking, how can everything still be so normal? The sun was still shining. The hills were still there. People were still living their lives. But inside me, nothing felt normal anymore. One phone call, that's all it took. 45 minutes. Normally, that's all it took to get home. But that day, it took me almost 3 hours. 3 hours, not because I didn't know where I was going, because I wasn't ready to get there. How do you drive home after hearing those words? How do you walk through your front door knowing that life from this moment on is going to look different? How do you tell the person you love that everything has changed? Those thoughts just kept circling over and over and over again. I remember thinking about my future. Would I lose my hair? Would I lose my breast? Would I survive? Would I get to grow old? Would I still laugh? Would people treat me differently? Would I recognize myself when all of this was over? Questions. So many questions, and absolutely no answers. I don't think I even realized I was crying at first. You know those moments where your eyes start filling with tears before you even give yourself permission to cry? That's where I was. trying so hard to stay composed, trying to stay strong, trying to keep driving until finally I couldn't. I reached the top of the grade overlooking the Wesley Valley. If you've never been there, it's hard to describe. When you're coming down into Lewiston, the whole valley opens up for you. You can see the Clearwater River, the Snake River joining, the Blue Bridge stretching across the water, the town below, the rolling hills that raised me home. Not because I was looking for answers. It wasn't any. Not because I suddenly felt hopeful. I didn't. However, because everything I had been trying to hold inside finally caught up to me. I couldn't drag it any mile. I just sat there crying. Not pretty movie tears, real tears. The kind that leaves your chest aching. The kind where your breathing comes in little pieces. The kind where you don't even know what you're crying for anymore. Was I crying because I was scared? Because I was angry? Because I was grieving? Because I didn't know what was coming next, honestly. I think it was all of it. Everything I've been holding together finally washed over me. Looked out over my hometown, the same place I'd known my whole life, the same river, the same hills, the same valley. Nothing around me had changed, but I had. In one phone call, my whole world has shifted. I remember just sitting there, no timeline, no destination, no rushing, just breathing, just trying to understand the life that had been handed to me. Looking back now, I think that the first time it truly stopped. Not because I wanted to, because life made me, and I had no idea. But the next thing I was about to notice stayed with me for years. It wasn't a doctor. It wasn't a nurse. It wasn't a family member. It wasn't something anyone said. It was something I saw, something so small that most people probably would have walked right past it. But on that day, it became one of the biggest lessons of my life. I just didn't know yet. We sat there for a long time. I don't know exactly how long. Enough that the tears slowed. Long enough that my breathing settled. Long enough that the silence wasn't quite so loud anymore. Everything was exactly the same. It amazed me. How could the world look exactly the same when mine had completely changed? I remember wiping the tears from my face, taking one deep breath, then another. I wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't praying for a sign. I wasn't asking for answers. I was simply sitting there, trying to catch my breath. I looked down. Right beside me, where I had stopped, peering out of a crack in solid rock, was one tiny flower. Just one. Growing where it had no business growing. I remember staring at it, really staring at it. I thought to myself, how? How does something so delicate grow through something so hard? How does something so beautiful find a way to bloom surrounded by rock? It had already survived enough just to be standing there. It pushed through rocks, through heat, through wind, through weather. And somehow it bloomed. I don't know how long I looked at that flower. Minutes, maybe longer. Time didn't really matter anymore. I just remember the way it made me feel. For the first time since that phone call, my thoughts became quiet. Not because my fear disappeared, because it didn't. Not because I suddenly knew everything would be okay, because I surely didn't. Nothing had changed. I still had cancer. I still had an uncertain future. I still had chemotherapy ahead of me. Surgeries, the radiation, scars. None of that changed. But for one moment, that little flower reminded me that beauty still exists. It reminded me that life hadn't stopped. It reminded me to breathe. People have asked me over the years, they think that that flower was a sign. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was simply a wildflower doing what wildflowers do. Maybe nature didn't know or care. As my whole world had just been turned upside down. But I know what it meant to me. That flower meant me in one of my darkest moments of my life. It didn't fix anything. It didn't whisper that everything would be okay or work out. It simply existed. Quietly, beautifully, strongly. And somehow that was enough. It reminded me that strength doesn't always look loud. Sometimes strength is simple. Continuing to grow, even when life is unbearably hard. I drove away that day, still scared, still overwhelmed, still uncertain. But I carried something home with me. Besides my diagnosis, I carried a lesson, one that I didn't fully understand then, but one that would continue teaching me for years. That little flower didn't just help me survive the day. I was diagnosed. It still teaches me today. When life gets busy, I think about that flower. When I'm rushing through another day, when I forget to stop and notice the world around me about that flower, it reminds me, look around you. Life is happening right now. And here's the beautiful part. Don't think that little flower was even just about me. I think everybody has a flower. Maybe not an actual flower. Maybe it's a memory, a place, a person, a song, a sunset, a moment that quickly changes the way you see the world. Something that made you stop and remember how precious life really is. A little wildflower became mine, not because it had magical power or something, because it didn't. Not because it changed my diagnosis, because it surely didn't, but because it changed my perspective. Years have passed since that day. I don't know if that flower is still growing there. The seasons have come and gone. The weather has changed, snow has fallen. Rain has washed over those rocks. Time has moved on. But what that little flower taught me never left. And I don't think it ever will. People often tell cancer survivors, "You're so strong. You made it. You beat cancer." And while those words come from a place of kindness, there's another side of survivorship that people don't often see. People know how to support you during treatment. They bring meals, they send cards, they check in. Your calendar is filled with appointments, doctors, nurses, blood work, chemotherapy, radiation, surgeries. Every week, someone is telling you what's next. You have a plan. You have a team. You have a direction. Then one day, it gets quiet. The appointments become further apart. The phone stops ringing as often. People smile and say, "Congratulations, you're done." But inside, you're just beginning. Nobody hands you the roadmap for survivorship. Nobody sits you down and says, "Here's what it's going to feel like 6 months from now. Here's what it's going to feel like when your first follow-up scan comes. Here's what it's going to feel like when somebody tells you everything looks good and you still can't quite relaxed. Nobody tells you those things because honestly, they're different for every survivor. What they don't tell you is that sometimes the hardest part isn't surviving cancer. Sometimes it's learning how to live afterwards. People keep telling me you'll get back to normal. I've heard those words so many times, and every time someone says them, I find myself asking the same question. What is normal anymore? The woman who walked into the doctor's office doesn't exist anymore. Not because cancer took her away, because life changed her. Cancer changed the way I see time. Before cancer, time was something I always thought I'd have more of. There would always be another weekend, another vacation, another birthday, another chance to tell someone I love them, another sunset, another tomorrow. Cancer didn't make tomorrow less certain. Tomorrow was never certain. Cancer simply made me finally understand that. That's a lesson I wish none of us had to learn the hard way. Because the truth is, none of us know what tomorrow holds. Whether you've had cancer or you're never spent a day in a hospital, none of us wake up with a promise that tomorrow belongs to us. That's why I don't rush through life anymore. Do I still get busy? Of course I do. I'm human. There are days when I have too much to do, days when I catch myself hurrying from one thing to the next. And now, something happens. That little flower comes back into my mind, almost like it's whispering. Slow down, look around, don't miss today. Oh, you're worried about tomorrow. And I listen, make my tea, and instead of gulping it down while thinking about everything else I have to do, I sit, I breathe. Sometimes I look outside, sometimes I don't do anything at all. And for the first time in my life, I realized that not wasting time, that's living. I notice sunsets now, not because they're rare, it's because I did finally slow down long enough to see them. I noticed the flowers growing along the road. I noticed the way the wind moves through the trees. I noticed conversations, laughter, silence. I noticed people because somewhere along this journey, I realized the little things aren't little. They're actually the biggest thing we've ever had. I think that's one of the greatest gifts survivorship has given me, not the cancer. I would never call cancer a gift, but the perspective. Perspective is something I'll carry forever. Because every ordinary day now feels extraordinary. Every ordinary day, Tuesday, every cup of tea, every hug, every I love you, every sunrise, every chance to sit with someone I care about. I don't take those moments for granted anymore. They're the moments that make up life, and maybe that's what survivorship really is. It's not pretending cancer never happened. It's not living in fear that it might come back. It's learning to hold both gratitude and uncertainty in the same hand. To say, I don't know what tomorrow's bringing. I know I'm going to be fully here today. That is how I'm learning, how I've learned to live. One of the biggest things cancer taught me was to stop waiting. Before cancer, I think I lived the way a lot of people do. I'd tell myself, I'll do that next week. I'll make the phone call tomorrow. I'll tell them later. I'll take that trip someday. I'll slow down when life isn't so busy. Maybe you've said those things too. I know I did, because we all believe without ever saying it out loud that we'll have another chance, another tomorrow, another birthday, another anniversary, another holiday, another opportunity. Cancer challenged that belief, not because it told me tomorrow wouldn't come, but because it reminded me that tomorrow was never promised in the first place. The truth doesn't belong only to cancer survivors. It belongs to every single one of us. None of us wake up with a guarantee. None of us know how many sunsets we have left. And I don't say that to make you afraid. I say it because I want you to truly live. There's a difference between existing and living. For years, I existed on a schedule, appointments, deadlines, responsibilities, always thinking about the next thing. Cancer taught me to come back to this thing, this moment, this one that's happening right now, because this moment is the only one we're actually promised. One of the most beautiful things that's happening in my life recently is that I stopped waiting to tell someone how I felt. I told someone I loved you. And I said it back. Don't share that because this is a love story. I share it because it's a life story. Years ago, I might have waited. I might have wondered if the timing was right. I might have worried about being vulnerable. And I won't lie, I still do. I might have been afraid of getting hurt. But cancer changed something inside me. It taught me that I'd rather speak the truth while I have the chance than spend years wondering what might have happened if I had stayed silent. If I loved someone, I want them to know. If I'm proud of someone, I want them to hear it. Someone has changed my life. I don't want to wait until I figure out to tell them. I want to tell them they're sitting beside me while they're laughing, while they're living, because love is never meant to be saved someday. Sometimes people think this way of living is about death. It's not. It's actually about life. It's about choosing to fully show up for the people who matter. It's about looking someone in the eye when they're talking. It's about putting the phone down. It's about taking one more picture, one more hug, one more conversation, one more sunset, one more cup of tea with someone you love. It's about realizing that ordinary moments are actually the moments that become extraordinary memories. I think about that little flower often. I really do. It didn't tell me you have to hurry. It told me the exact opposite. It whispered, slow down. You're here. How many beautiful things have we all walked past because we were too busy getting smiles? How many sunsets have we missed? How many hugs have we rushed? How many conversations have we cut short because we had somewhere else to be? I wonder about that sometimes. And I wonder how different our lives might feel. Every once in a while, we simply stopped. Not forever, just for a minute. I know I can't change the world. I know I can't make people live different. I know I can't make everyone stop rushing. Honestly, that's not my job. My job isn't to tell you how to live. My job is simply to share my story, to share what changed me, and maybe, just maybe, something in my story will help you see something in yours. Maybe tomorrow morning, you'll notice the sunrise. Maybe on the drive home from work, you'll pull over for a few minutes instead of rushing. Maybe you'll call your mom. Maybe you'll tell your best friend you appreciate it. Maybe you'll finally say, I love you to someone. Not because you're afraid, but because it's true. Because if life has taught me anything, it's this. Love spoken today is always better than love left unsaid. As I sit here today, years after that phone call, years after chemo, years after surgery, years after radiation, I can honestly tell you this. Cancer changed my life, but it didn't get to decide what my life would become. Did it leave scars? Absolutely. Some you can see, some you can't. Did it change me? Without any question, I'm not the same woman who answered the phone all those years ago. But if I'm being truthful, I don't spend my time wishing I could go back to who I was, because that woman hadn't yet learned some of life's greatest lessons. She hadn't learned how precious an ordinary morning can be. She hadn't learned to slow down long enough to really watch a sunset. She hadn't learned that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes strength is laughter. When life has been hard, sometimes strength is letting yourself cry and getting back up anyways. Sometimes strength is always yourself, allowing yourself to let even after you've been hurt. Sometimes it's simply choosing to hope. Hope doesn't erase fear. I still have moments when fear shows up. I still have moments that make my stomach tighten. I still understand what it's like to wait for those test results. Those feelings don't magically disappear, but they don't get to drive my life anymore. Hope does. Gratitude does. Love does. And I think back to that day I looked in the valley. I don't remember only the tears anymore. I remember the flower, the tiny blue flower, growing through the solid rocks. I remember me, that life has an incredible way of finding light in unexpected places. It reminded me that we are often stronger than we believe we are, not because we're fearless, but because we keep growing anyways. I don't know what you're carrying today. Maybe your story has nothing to do with cancer. Maybe you're grieving someone you love. Maybe you're rebuilding after a divorce. Maybe you're trying to find yourself after losing who you thought you were. Maybe you're quietly fighting battles no one else can see. Or maybe life has simply been heavy lately. If that's you, I want you to know something. You don't have to have everything figured out today. You don't have to pretend you're okay when you're not. You don't have to rush your healing. Healing isn't a race. It's not a straight line. Some days you feel strong. Some days you feel like you're starting over. Both are part of the journey. Give yourself permission to be exactly where you are. And if you can, pause every once in a while. Take a deep breath. Look around. Notice the beauty that's already there. It may be a flower growing or cracking a rock. It might be the sound of your child's laughter, smell of the fresh coffee, warmth of someone. Another ordinary day. Those moments matter. They're easy to overlook, but they're the piece that make up a beautiful life. I hope my story doesn't leave you feeling sad. I hope it leaves you feeling awake. I hope that tomorrow, before you rush into your day, you stop for just a moment and take a breath, look around, and notice something beautiful. Tell someone you love them. Make the phone call you've been putting off. Watch the sunset instead of the clock. Laugh a little longer. Stay at the dinner table a few extra minutes. Hold someone's hand because none of us know how many ordinary days will be given. And maybe that's exactly what makes them extraordinary. Before I let you go, I'd like to leave you one thought. I found my flower on one of the hardest days of my life. It reminded me that beauty can exist besides heartbreak, that hope can exist beside fear, that life continues even when it looks different than we imagine. My flower happened to grow from a crack in the rock overlooking the valley I called home. Yours? Maybe be somewhere completely different, but I truly believe it's there. So I hope you find your flower. I hope you notice that thing that makes you stop, the thing that reminds you to breathe, the thing that reminds you that you're alive. And when you find it, hold on to it. Let it remind you that even in life's hardest sessions, there is still beauty, there is still hope, there is still love, and there is still life waiting to be lived. Thank you for spending this time. Thank you for trusting me with a piece of my story. And if today reminded you of someone you love, don't wait. Tell them. Until next time, be kind to yourself. Be kind to one another. Keep leading with curiosity. Keep looking beyond the surface. And remember, we don't have to have it all figured out today. We just have to keep moving forward. One moment at a time.